Hello and welcome back to our series of interviews with Euro's amazing members across the world. It gives me great pleasure to welcome back also Löfgren Gunsten, who is the Managing Director and owner of Nordic Relocation Group, who operate across Sweden. If you didn't see our first interview with Ursula, probably 2 months ago now, it doesn't seem like that long, it's quite a while, then it's in the library on YouTube. So Ursula, it is always lovely to see you. Thank you very much for taking the time again to do this. First of all, I want to find out how Lars, your husband, is doing.
Well, thank you for asking me to come back on there. So I didn't make a total mess of the last meeting, which sounds good. No, we're doing fine. Lars is doing fine. I mean, he is slowly but surely, but this is something I think that most people who have had the COVID-19 rehab takes time. So I think, slowly but surely, and not to make too many demands, which can sometimes be a little frustrating, but it is what it is. And so I'm thinking end of the year, maybe he'll be back in shape. Yeah.
Really? That is a long recuperation.
It's a long time. And I've threatened him that we get a personal trainer next week.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Why not? These are all good ideas. I mean, just think if you're watching and you didn't see my first interview with Ursula, both Ursula and Lars, her husband, contracted COVID quite early on, right?
Yes, it was in the beginning of March. So, I mean, I had a very mild form. I was sick for about a week, but he did go into hospital in intensive care. So that was a whole different ballgame. Definitely.
I can't imagine again at that point what you all went through, because the fear must have been terrific at that point.
Well, there is that, but I mean, when you're in the middle of it, you just deal with it. I mean, there's nothing trying to stress and go crazy isn't going to help anybody. So, you deal with it and you make the best of it. But of course, if there were questions and there were sort of thoughts going in all kinds of crazy directions, but he's back home and that we're grateful for that. So we'll take it from there. Absolutely.
I'm really pleased that it's moving. It's all moving in the right direction.
Absolutely. And the thing is, we got it in the beginning of the whole pandemic period, at least for Europe. And so I sort of feel we got a really good care at the hospital and all this. So we can't complain. I think it might be worse, coming in a bit into the period when there were many that were needing care that you might have not had the same attention that he actually received.
That's a very good point. And actually, so again, we talked about this last time. We know that Sweden took a very different approach to COVID-19 and decided not to do mandatory enforced lockdowns. But as we said before, most people were obeying the guidance.
Yes.
And doing quite well. Did you see, subsequent to us speaking last time, a dramatic rise in hospital admissions?
Well, there was for a time, and what we've seen is that, at least in Sweden, it tends to be the Stockholm area was among the first to go out there, and where we did get quite a lot of people catching the COVID-19. Other parts of the country haven't had the same stressful situation. There are more now areas where they are getting it and where it's spreading, but we still have regions that are where the rate isn't that impressive at all, I must say, which is fantastic, really.
That is very good news.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such an interesting. I mean, Sweden is going to be talked about for many years to come. We're going to be looking.
Yes, either we made a fantastic choice or we really bummed out. I'm not really sure which yet.
But
so we'll find out.
At the moment, from the figures that I've seen, the percentages are actually really very close in terms of lockdowns and non-lockdowns. So.
Yes, and I think it has to do with the question is really why the different governments have chosen the different ways of doing things. And I think in rule, I think one of the things with Swedes is the fact that we tend to really follow recommendations. And I think that's where you'll see that in many other places, maybe you need to have the law that comes in to stress the need for being aware and the consideration that needs to be in place.
We're just about to send out the cultural implications of coronavirus survey to all our members, and it's going to be very fascinating to see what comes back about that, because like you said,
yes,
you wonder if governments were making decisions based on how likely they thought their populations were to obey recommendations as opposed to
Yes.
laws.
I agree. And I think it is a cultural thing. And I think you'll find that in some of the countries, it is that we will listen and we will obey. In other parts, you tend to have more of a suspicious attitude towards government or authorities in general. So it'll be interesting to see. I look forward to that survey.
It's coming out on Monday.
Yeah.
Even tomorrow. So I'll do. But I wanted to just catch up with you about what's happening now in Sweden. I mean, where are you at in terms of how things have changed, daily life?
Well, I think a lot of people coming into Stockholm, for instance, would be surprised that it's kind of like it looks very normal as to what it's been before, but people are considerate of distance. In stores and all this, they are very considerate. What we've had is that up till now, we've been allowed to travel a distance of 2 hours from your home.
Right.
On the 13th of June, they open up, so we can actually travel within Sweden. So national travels would be absolutely okay, but still being aware of the consideration of distance to others and so on. And so no really big parties. There are minimum in how many people should be seeing each other at one given time. And absolutely be aware of that if you are in the risk factor or you have passed your 70th birthday, to be very careful, because this is something that if they get it at that age, there's a risk that they'll be very, very sick. Yes.
It's certainly, as data is coming through, and obviously, you know, saying earlier, the data is very, very key in all this.
It is key. And I think, you know, it's of course, when you pass your 70th birthday, very often you have some sort of a related risk factor going on, maybe with high blood pressure or cholesterol or diabetes or what have you. So they do need to be careful, definitely.
And by and large, so when you said you can now you'll be able to travel nationally, does that mean that the internal flights will be operating? It's a big country. It's
a big country. They do have the flights, but I think people are aware of trying to keep distance. I don't think that they're going to be using the planes. I think, you know, the train system, if you travel by train, you are not sitting very close to each other anymore. The seats are, really? You know, yes, you have to book your seat, and you're sitting very much apart from everybody else. So there is that in consideration. I think a lot of people are driving.
Yeah.
But those who have cars will use the cars. I've had to go down to the other offices I have in Gothenburg and Malmö once or twice, and I've used the car, because that way I feel I'm not close to anybody, I'm not causing any issues, and nobody is affecting me either. So
it's interesting, because when I was talking to Priscilla Montana a couple of weeks ago in Dallas, she said, you know, the rate of how cities will open up in America is going to be very dependent on the ability for people to use cars. So cities like LA will open up much quicker than cities like Chicago.
Yes.
For the reasons you just said.
Exactly. No, and I think so too. And here what we've found is that looking at the news and what they're saying, for instance, Swedes, we're not going to be traveling abroad. We were having what you mentioned earlier, staycation.
Staycation, yeah.
Yes, not vacation, but staycation. So they're going to be in Sweden, and they've seen that the people wanting to buy summer homes has risen. That amount has gone up quite a lot.
Wow.
And rental properties for the summer, there's nothing available at the moment. It's all taken. Yeah.
Really?
So people do want to go off and have a vacation somewhere, but now it will be in the country. Yes, in Sweden.
That's very interesting. Obviously, a lot of the sort of foreign property ownership in Spain, Italy, Greece, France is from people from Sweden and Scandinavia. That's going to really impact.
That will impact, but you know, as a matter of fact, the thing is though that we're not very welcome in many places at the moment. You know, if you look at where they're going to be opening up the country borders for, and they need the tourists to come in and all this. And many of them, they're saying that, you know, the Danes are welcome, the Saxons, the Germans are welcome, the Swedes aren't welcome. So I'm guessing it's the different approaches to the COVID-19, how it's been handled.
It's so weird, because the numbers are very similar anyway. I mean, we just had news, I think, I can't can't remember who was telling me, but I think it was you who was telling me that, you know, that France has now said you may visit your second homes, right?
Yes, yes.
If you want to.
Well, I think, and anybody's welcome. I mean, anybody from the EU is welcome to travel into
right.
Sweden. That's never been really a big issue as such. And anybody non-EU would have to have that they're coming in because this is their home.
Yes.
That they would have that as the excuse to come in. Otherwise, it's hard for them. Borders are still closed. Yeah.
So how is your team? How are they doing?
The team is doing well. We had, because there were a few of us who had the COVID-19 or thought we'd had it, we did some testing last week, and 50% of the Stockholm office showed that they were immune now. They had antibodies towards COVID-19. So quite a few of us have had the little bug, have had the visit. Yep.
Come out the other side, 50%. Wow.
That's quite a big group. I mean, because they're saying that, you know, if you listen to everything going on around, about 80% of the population should be that they're not going to get it. That they're thinking they might actually be, you know, that they're immune for some reason.
Susceptible, yeah.
Yes, yeah. So it will be interesting once it's all over and they start to really look at this, even if it's difficult to, you know, compare data because we've gathered it in so many different ways.
Yes.
So.
No, that's true. That's fascinating. Well, I'm glad everyone's, you know, kind of come through that. And has that made the team feel a little bit more confident about being able to go out in the world? Yeah. And
what we can do is we can sort of use those who know have had it. If we have any kind of a situation or people coming in who we might be worried that, you know, there's a risk for any kind of spreading of the COVID, then we'll choose somebody who's already immune. And of course, everybody gets to say, yes, we'll do it, or no, we won't. We also have the case where we don't want too many in our cars at the same time.
Sure.
So we have a family coming in next week, parents and 2 teenagers. And our cars aren't that big, and we sort of feel it's a you know, the space isn't all that good for that many people. So we actually said that, well, let's take the parents on an orientation tour for part of the day, and then we'll drop them off and pick up the teenagers. Yes, and do something with them so that there'll be a minimum amount of people in the car. Yeah. And we'll have them in the back seat, and we'll have the driver showing around. So, you know, just trying to figure out how do we do this? What are the options that will work and make people happy? Because I think if you come in and you have a family with you, they're not going to be happy to be stuck at the hotel while mom and dad are given the treat.
Sure, absolutely. And tell me this, so in terms of, obviously you're starting up again and you're looking at all those processes, and I'd love to come on to that in a minute. But in terms of the practicalities, so people coming into Sweden at the moment, do they have to self-isolate or quarantine?
No.
Okay.
Well, I don't know. It hasn't been needed because we don't, I mean, if you're non-EU, you're not welcome here as such. Right. And anybody else coming in, no, they haven't had a self-isolation. The companies, though, if they're coming in to work with one of the big companies, they'll normally ask them to self-isolate for the first 2 weeks and work from home.
That's it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So that's still happening to some extent. Because so we'll see.
It's interesting, like you said about you know, the kids are left in the hotel and, you know, parents are off doing a jolly. In terms of what's happening in the UK, you know, lots of people who are starting to move in now are going to corporate housing for the first 2 weeks, and it's quite strict. The quarantine is monitored, and that's a very different experience to at least coming into Sweden into an apartment or into a hotel. You can still go to I don't know. Can you still go to a museum, a restaurant, a shop?
I'm not sure what they would do there, but I think so. Yeah. We haven't had anybody stopping as such. Okay. You know, and we also had the case when these flights were bringing in Swedes from abroad who had, you know, they were stuck somewhere in the world, and they did not go. They just walked right through. There were no tests done or anything, which I found a bit strange and a little alarming, because I kind of feel that we should be. The government's talking about doing more tests, but we've been very slow to do this. And compared to our neighbors, Norway and Denmark and Finland, we are way behind when it comes to testing. I don't know, Richard, they've been testing people working in the healthcare departments and in these areas where it's important. We do meet people, but for the regular folks, it hasn't been that great. Now they've opened up the possibility to do the tests at the pharmacies and other places. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So that,
but it's a pretty high cost. It's 750 crowns, so or about 75 euros. So
okay. Yeah, wow, that's fascinating. I mean, I was talking with Laurent Kistevert from Vietnam last week.
Yeah, yeah.
Their track and trace was just incredibly, 4 stages of separation. You came into contact with this person, this person, this person, this person, all the way down the line.
Yeah.
And 300 cases, no deaths.
No, that's fantastic. And that's where I think it'll be interesting to look at these countries who are used to big catastrophes like this, who are used to taking care of it. It's going to be interesting to see, because they manage so much better than we have.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
But again, it all comes down to culture.
It is.
So you can ask a Swede to stay home and a Swede will stay home.
Yes.
It's very different. So tell me, what are your teams doing? Because as you said, you've got people coming in.
We have people coming in, but we haven't had that many. So I think what we've been doing is we've been working with those who came in before the COVID started or the pandemic was established. And so we've been managing that. So that's kind of coming to an end in many cases. So what we have all the orders that are in, and we've had quite a few orders coming in, but where the start date is, well, depending on when the borders are opened and depending on when people start coming in. And so we have starting dates in August and September and even in October in some cases. So what I'm thinking is that people will have to try to enjoy their vacations in July and August, because when it's all over, there's going to be a splatter of orders that we need to really start working with, because we'll have people in place. Yeah. So that's going to be interesting, definitely.
Yeah, it certainly is. It's one of the reasons why when we were weighing up the logistics of running the global conference in Costa Rica, I don't know whether you know.
Yes, I saw that. Yes.
Postponed that for that very reason, that as we were talking with people, they're like, well, if things have started again, we're not going anywhere. We're going to be really busy.
You're going to be extremely busy. And we've tried to sort of sort certain things out ahead of time if we can. So in those when it's possible, we'll try to do viewings through Skype or other venues, just to make sure that people see, if we can get them to choose ahead of time, that then we'll have part of the jobs already done when they arrive. Yeah. And they won't have to go into hotels or short-term accommodation. We'll just sort of directly move them into the facilities that they've chosen. So that's one way of trying to sort of bring down the workload when this whole thing starts to open up.
It's going to be amazing to see how that works out, because obviously, the traditional models that, you were the president of Euro, you know how everybody works, is that sort of collaborative sense of like this neighborhood, you like this apartment, getting the feel for what somebody wants. I know I was talking with Christine Martin, interviewing her last week in Barcelona, and she said something very similar, but that the videos that you will do will not be this sort of, this is a beautiful apartment, look at the view. It will be really truthful. You need to bear in mind this bedroom is small, or
I think doing a showing via Skype and so, then we've done that quite a lot. It's never really the same as actually seeing the apartment. Sure. But I think we'll just have to try to be as flexible as possible. And I think there's a big understanding from all parties, from the clients to the assignees coming in, that let's try to do as best we can under the circumstances. Absolutely. And if it were the wrong place for whatever reason, we would try to maybe do a new home search later on and see if we can bring down the fees, our fees or something, to make it work for them. But I think the important thing is that just finding a good place to start with and see what happens.
I think it's absolutely brilliant. And I mean, from that point of view as well, it's like if any industry is able to respond to something like this in terms of managing people's expectations in advance, it's this one, right?
Yes. And I think what is nice to know now is that most people are very considerate and they're very understanding. So when there is a situation, because my main concern is that there are going to be so many people coming in at the same time that it is going to be hard to manage it properly and to give them the full attention that they're entitled to and that they've actually bought. But so also, we'll see.
There'll be huge pressure on the housing supply.
It will be. And that's why we're trying to say, let's look at this ahead of time. Yes. If we can, sort that out before, that would be great for everybody involved, I think.
we're talking about these extra processes, and you've mentioned, the family coming in with the two teenagers and, the cars and splitting people up. Are there any other kind of aspects of your normal day-to-day work where you're looking at kind of innovative new solutions?
Well, we've had to, we can't, going into the bank, for instance, opening up a bank account or having the meetings with local registration, you're not allowed to be more than a certain amount of people there, and we're not allowed to follow them all the time. So in this case with the banks, you have these queues outside the banks where they're only bringing 1 or 2 people at a time. And so what we try to do there is to book the time for them, and that we're on the phone so that they can talk to us at the same time as they're meeting people in the bank or at the tax office, should they be worried or uncertain as to what's going on. So we'll help them at a distance, which is not really the same as standing there right next to them, holding their hand and sort of easing the process. But it's proven to be, it works.
Okay.
It works.
Yeah.
It's maybe not that sweet,
it's not
where you actually
holding that we're.
It's not holding hands as such, but we're not supposed to be doing that now anyway. So.
I was just talking to Michelle Bramstoft, and she was saying that she is looking to do her citizenship, her Danish citizenship, and on the 29th of June, it's already been postponed. Okay. But yes. One of the big things is in the law is that you shake hands with the registrant. Everybody has to do this because it's one big group that does it at the same time. And
okay,
I can't figure out how, because it's you're not supposed to shake hands.
No. So you'll probably have to do the Corona thing with your elbow,
right.
So.
I wanted to ask you, every time we've spoken, and also when I've spoken to your other colleagues in Sweden, the national mood has seemed to be quite buoyant. How are people feeling in Sweden right now?
I think there's some frustration because, but I think that's going to be everywhere. When this thing's been going on for as long as it has, then you do feel kind of, even if you can move around in your city and all this, it is, you can't travel as you've done before, maybe.
Oh, yeah.
You can't have go to a concert. There's certain things that are just not happening. And, but at the same time, I think people are very accepting. And I think that's the positive thing here. There are so many things that you normally do that you can't do at the moment, or you need to consider before you do. So why not enjoy it? The way I see it is, if you have a good place to stay, if I'm blessed, I have a lovely home, I have a fabulous garden. It's never looked better. and at the moment, the weather is fantastic. So it's trying to take, look at every day and take the good parts that you have there. And yes, there's a little bit more, you need to consider certain things a bit more, but why not? I'm more thinking of the good stuff. What's the good stuff at the end of this trip? What's that going to be?
Yeah.
Is this going to be a healthier lifestyle? People working more from home, those who can, that they're working from home more, you have a better quality of life, maybe. Family relationships are better, unless they're really bad, because being so close to each other will probably not have saved any,
that's a risk.
any such marriages, but still.
It's very true. That's very interesting that you say that. And I know, we know each other well, and I know you're a very optimistic person, and you're very glass half full. And I feel the same. We have to take from this as much positivity as we can, and be, looking up and not looking down. And like you say, I'm just grateful for things that I really didn't think about before. A garden, being able to get up.
Yes. And I thought, when I was talking to you earlier, Dominic, I thought it was great what your idea for you and Tad, that you're going to be vacationing at home. I think you should share that, because I think that's lovely.
Yeah. What else can you do? It's like, we're supposed to be in Greece this week, and you just think, that's not going to happen. But yes, staycations, a big thing. Do what you would do on holiday, just at home, without.
Exactly. Enjoy your books, have that glass of wine in the middle of the day, and enjoy the sun if it's out there. And I think that's great. It's really just breaking away from the everyday regular life. Why not?
And will you get a chance to do anything over the summer, or will you staycation in your lovely house?
We'll have a staycation, and what we're trying to do now is that once or twice a week, we try to go to a place with a nice outdoor restaurant.
Lovely.
And enjoy a meal. Yeah. If the weather allows it. Well, in that way, we're sort of looking at what's happening in the region, what's happening around where we live.
Yeah.
And you find yourself that there's many beautiful places very close by, and that tourists see, but that you don't normally see as a local. So, you know, really looking at what's out there. What would I do if I were a tourist looking at Stockholm? Where would I go?
That's
so
a
it's
really
fantastic.
smart idea. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I remember you very kindly took us on the most wonderful lunch cruise when we were doing the conference in Stockholm. Is that running at the moment? Because that was wonderful to go around the
No, there's a lot that's closed down at the moment. So, but I mean, it is possible to go out into the archipelago. But it's the difficult part right now is trying to find a place to rent a hotel room or something, because people are looking at what's happening locally and what can they do locally. So that's very true. So yeah.
Also, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Lovely to talk to you, and I'm so pleased that your team are well. And I mean, that's an amazing, you know, doing the testing was very smart. Again, you know, talk about putting in place the contingencies to you know, enable you to work safely with your clients is, you know, way up there.
Well, thank you very much. And I mean, my heart goes out to everybody who's having a really tough time, because I know many of the members are. So hopefully we will see many of them next year.
Absolutely.
Fingers crossed. And if there's anything we can do to help those who really are, you know, hurting, I'd love to know that. Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely.
So, okay.
Also, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Take care. My love to everybody.
Bye
bye. Thank you. Bye.